Brooklyn, 1980s. 3 a.m. A recycling truck backs into a transfer station on a dead-end street. No reporters. No inspectors. No cameras. Just one flickering light and two men who don't talk unless they have to. The truck lifts its hydraulic bed. Bags of mixed paper spill out. Except, it's not paper. It's cash. Tens of thousands of dollars packed into trash bags, dumped like yesterday's newspapers. That money disappears into a steel shipping container. Door closes. Padlock snaps. One man signs a clipboard. The truck rolls out. Nobody watching knows it yet, but this is the Genovese family's recycling racket, a money laundering system disguised as environmental responsibility. And the man behind it is someone most people never heard of. Alphonse, Allie Shades, Malangone. If you like true stories about power, corruption, and the parts of New York nobody ever talks about, subscribe, because this story used garbage to hide millions, and it stayed hidden for decades. New York City, 1980s. At a time when most mob bosses cared about drugs, gambling, construction, and unions, one man saw money where others saw trash. Malangone wasn't a street thug. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't want attention. He wanted control. And he found the perfect industry: waste hauling and recycling. Back then, commercial trash collection wasn't run by the city. It was run by private companies. And those companies were controlled by the 5 families, with the Genovese family sitting right at the top. Malangone understood the system better than anyone. Every restaurant, every deli, every office, every grocery store, every factory. They all needed their trash removed. Not once, not sometimes, every single day. And that meant every business in New York was forced to deal with the same people, the same routes, the same companies, the same unions. The mob didn't threaten you to take your business. They controlled the entire industry, which meant you didn't have a choice. Malangone took it further. He didn't just want the garbage routes. He wanted the recycling plants, the transfer stations, the landfills, the scrap yards, and the union locals that kept the trucks moving. If a competitor tried to bid lower, he was suddenly visited by men who wanted to talk. If a business owner tried switching haulers, his dumpster mysteriously caught fire. If a new company tried to break in, they didn't last a month. Older New Yorkers remember this time clearly. You didn't choose who took your garbage. You paid who you were told to pay. And you paid exactly what they told you. Price fixing wasn't a rumor. It was the entire business model. By the mid-80s, Malangone was running an empire so quiet and so profitable that even other mobsters underestimated him. But he understood something the rest didn't. Recycling was the perfect laundering machine. Because unlike cash from drugs or loan sharking, recycling money came with invoices, weight tickets, disposal fees, environmental reports, city contracts. It looked legitimate. And when New York passed its first major recycling rules in the late 1980s, Malangone didn't panic. He celebrated. More regulations meant more confusion. More confusion meant more opportunities. And more opportunities meant more money. Restaurants were suddenly required to recycle cardboard. Offices had to separate paper. Factories had to document everything. Who controlled the documentation? The same people who controlled the trucks. Businesses were charged a recycling fee, even if nothing was recycled. Paper loads were weighed heavier than they actually were. Cardboard was double-billed. Scrap metal was skimmed before being processed. And every penny flowed through companies secretly owned by the Genovese family. The FBI later estimated that the mob's waste and recycling cartel was overcharging New York businesses by $500 million a year. And at the center of that quiet financial hurricane was Allie Shades, the man who treated recycling like Wall Street treated derivatives. He didn't need a casino. He didn't need drugs. He didn't need a crew of gunmen. He had garbage. And garbage was safer, cleaner, more reliable, and more profitable than anything else the mob controlled. But every empire, no matter how silent, leaves a trail. And Malangone was about to face a problem he never planned for. An accountant who knew too much. A recycling law that exposed a crack. And an FBI agent who'd been watching from the shadows for almost a decade. The trouble started quietly, the same way most mob investigations begin. Not with a raid, not with a shooting, not with a rival family crossing a line. It started with numbers. And numbers are harder to hide than bodies. In the late 1980s, New York passed stricter recycling laws. Businesses now needed paperwork, showing how much cardboard, paper, and scrap they produced every week. Most companies didn't understand the rules. Most didn't care. They just handed everything to their hauler and trusted the paperwork was real. But at one midtown office building, a young accountant began noticing something strange. Every month, their recycling totals doubled, then tripled. But the amount of trash in their bins never changed. Same workers, same output, same amount of cardboard. Yet the numbers on the invoices kept going up. He called the hauling company to ask why. They told him it was a new environmental adjustment fee. He asked for details. They told him it wasn't his concern. He asked again. 2 days later, 2 men in work boots visited his office. They didn't threaten him. They didn't raise their voices. They simply said the paperwork was correct and the issue was closed. He tried pushing harder. He didn't get answers. He got transferred. And that's when the first crack appeared in Malangone's system. Because the accountant wasn't the only one asking questions. The Department of Sanitation was also noticing that private recycling companies reported unbelievable tonnage increases. Some haulers claimed they collected more cardboard than the neighborhoods even produced. But the most suspicious detail? Nearly all the companies reporting inflated numbers were connected to the same group, the same trade association, the same union, local, the same recycling facilities. And many of those facilities were tied to one quiet Genovese capo. Alphonse, Allie Shades, Malangone. By 1989, FBI analysts began running comparisons. They noticed patterns. Businesses paying identical rates, identical surcharges, identical recycling adjustments, sometimes down to the exact penny. That's not coincidence. That's a cartel. Agents dug deeper. They found dozens of private carting companies that supposedly competed with each other, but all used the same weigh stations, the same dispatchers, the same disposal sites. On paper, they were competitors. In reality, they were one company, Malangone Incorporated, built through intimidation, silent partnerships, and union muscle. If a hauler tried to go independent, their trucks were suddenly vandalized. If a company tried to bid lower, their drivers were threatened. If a transfer station tried working with outsiders, they mysteriously failed inspections. But for Malangone, the real genius wasn't intimidation. It was the paperwork. The racket didn't need gunmen. It needed accountants. A load of cardboard weighed 2 tons? Write down 4. A trash pickup had 40 bags? Bill for 60. A recycling plant processed metal scrap? Skim 10% before weighing it. Every sheet of paper had a $sign on it. And when you controlled the entire path from the dumpster behind a deli in Brooklyn all the way to the landfill in New Jersey, you controlled the money. By 1990, the FBI estimated New York businesses were being overcharged by nearly $500 million a year. To most mob bosses, that number would cause greed. To Malangone, it caused caution. He didn't want to be John Gotti. He didn't want cameras. He didn't want headlines. He didn't want anybody saying his name. He wanted silence. He stayed off the streets. He avoided nightclubs. He didn't walk around in silk suits or diamond pinky rings. He dressed like a quiet older man who worked in the sanitation department. He blended in with the industry he controlled. But one thing he couldn't control was the trucks, because trucks leave trails, routes, schedules, drivers, fuel logs, weigh slips, dispatch records. And in 1991, one FBI agent got exactly what he needed: a driver who was tired of being shaken down. The driver claimed he was forced to falsify weight tickets. He claimed he was told to throw recycling into regular trash loads. He claimed he was ordered to dump bags in one borough, then bill another. But the most important thing he said was a name: Allie Shades. He said it quietly, almost in a whisper, like someone might hear him through the walls. For the first time, the FBI had a witness who connected the entire garbage cartel to a single man, and they were just getting started. The FBI didn't move fast. They didn't kick down doors. They didn't raid trucks. They studied. For 2 full years, agents built a map of every company, every driver, every transfer station connected to the cartel. The chart looked like a spider web: 20 companies at first, then 30, then almost 50. Different names, different owners, different addresses, but the same unseen hand behind all of them. Alphonse Malangone. Agents tapped dispatch radios. They hid cameras near weigh stations. They recorded conversations inside garbage trucks. They followed drivers at 4 in the morning, through industrial Brooklyn, into Queens, across the bridge into New Jersey. The pattern was always the same. Loads were overweight on paper. Invoices were inflated. Routes were fixed. Competition was an illusion. And the money never stayed in the company that earned it. It moved in circles: funnel, redirect, disguise, wash. One truck route could generate $20,000 a week. Multiply that by 100 routes, 300 trucks, dozens of companies, landfills, scrapyards, cardboard balers, metal recyclers. The garbage business wasn't dirty. It was gold. By 1994, the FBI had enough evidence to take down the entire system. They called it Operation Wasteland. Older New Yorkers remember those headlines: dozens of indictments, dozens of arrests, dozens of businessmen who claimed they had no idea their haulers were owned by the mob. But behind the scenes, agents wanted something bigger. They didn't want the drivers. They didn't want the small company owners. They wanted the architect, Malangone. They began the final phase, the same way they started. Quietly, agents focused on one man who handled money for a scrap metal company linked to Malangone. He wasn't a tough guy. He wasn't made. He was an employee with a family and a mortgage, and he'd been cooking numbers for years. The FBI sat him down, showed him the bank transfers, the invoices, the fake recycling credits, the weight tickets that never matched the actual loads. He held out for half an hour. Then he asked for water. Then he asked for a lawyer. Then he asked what would happen to his job. And finally, he broke. He explained how the invoices were printed, who signed them, who approved them, who told him what to write. And then he said the words, agents, had been waiting almost a decade to hear. It all goes through Allie Shades. That testimony cracked the entire cartel open. On a warm morning in late 1995, federal agents moved in. They hit recycling plants, office buildings, truck yards, scrap metal facilities, and transfer stations throughout New York and New Jersey. Drivers were pulled out of trucks. Dispatch radios went silent. Weigh stations were sealed off. File cabinets were emptied. And in Brooklyn, at a modest house on a quiet street, agents arrested Alphonse Malangone. No shootout, no chase, no drama. He opened the door, nodded, and put his hands out, like he'd been expecting them. Inside the house, agents found paperwork, stacks of it, invoices, hauling contracts, union notes, records of cash businesses, names of silent partners, nearly all of it tied to one of the most profitable criminal rackets New York had ever seen. For decades, people thought the mob made their money in drugs, gambling, extortion, and loans. They didn't know the real fortune was sitting on the curb every night at 9 o'clock, waiting for a truck to pick it up. Malangone never bragged about what he did. He never sought attention. He moved through the city like a ghost. No one outside the industry even recognized him, but inside the 5 families, everyone knew who controlled the garbage. Everyone knew who ran the recycling game. Everyone knew who fixed the routes, set the prices, punished competitors, and collected a cut from every dumpster in the city. He didn't build an empire with guns. He built it with paperwork, bills, weights, fees, permits, and a system that was designed to help him hide in plain sight. After his arrest, federal prosecutors described the racket as one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations ever uncovered in New York. And when the cartel collapsed, something strange happened. Commercial trash prices across the city dropped almost overnight. Some businesses saw their bills cut in half, others by 60%, some even more. For the first time in decades, New York finally knew what garbage really cost without the mob's markup. Malangone faded from the headlines after the trial. He wasn't a celebrity gangster. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. And he wasn't interested in being remembered. But here's the cold truth. For nearly 20 years, one quiet man from Brooklyn manipulated the entire recycling industry of America's biggest city. He turned cardboard into cash. He turned regulations into opportunity. He turned trash into wealth. And he did it so smoothly that almost nobody realized it until it was already over. Most mob stories end with bodies, shootouts, and betrayals. This one ends with something far simpler and far more haunting. A truck backing up to a warehouse, a pile of mixed paper hitting the ground, and the quiet sound of cash being swept into the dark.